Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another how-to video. I'm recording this on August 26th, 2015. In this chapter, we're working on automating our tests, and in the last episode, we just finished getting Karma set up, our cross-browser test runner. So now we have the ability to run our tests in a real browser. And as you recall, the way we do this is by first starting the Karma server by running node modules bin karma start. And of course, on Windows, those will be backslashes. Then capturing the browser by visiting localhost 9876. And then in another tab, running Karma again with the run option. This will have Karma take our source file, our JavaScript code, and send it down to the web browser to actually run our test. So when we run this, you can see it flashes for a moment and our tests run and it says it's successful. And we saw that it failed when we were using something, a require statement that isn't supported by browsers, proving that it actually is running in the browser and that there is a meaningful difference between running in Node and in the browser, which is why it's so important to run in the browser. Now, what we've done here so far is fantastic, but it's not part of our automated build. And remember, what we want to be able to do is type one command, in our case, Jake, and have all of our tests run and have that be reproducible across all the members of our team. Now, we've taken an important step forward in reproducibility by checking Karma into our source control and setting up our getignore to ignore the binaries that Karma creates. Now what we need to do is modify our Jake file, which, if you'll recall, is how our actual automated build works. It's been a long time since we've run our Jake file, so let's just go ahead and run it and see where we're at. Well, you can see, because we've been running all these commands manually, we've actually had a couple of things pop up that are causing our linting to fail. Specifically, test.js is saying that describe is not defined, it is not defined. These are global variables, global functions that are installed by Mocha and we're using in our tests. Remember, the only way we can't actually run this test using Node directly. We have to either run it with Mocha or run it through Karma. So, and what Mocha does is it adds these global variables. We need to modify our lint globals right here to say that these globals are available. Specifically, what we're going to look for is describe and it. And it turns out there's a couple of other ones that Mocha commonly uses, so I'll go ahead and put those in as well. So I'm going to say that we're going to add our describe global, and I'm going to say false to say that we never changed this. This is very similar to the way that we set up our globals for Jake itself, except now, rather than being specific to this one file, we're saying these globals can be used in any file that we're linting. So our globals are going to be describe, it, and then a couple of other globals Mocha installs is before, after, before each, and after each. I'm going to go ahead and put it in a comment that these are here for Mocha. You know, as I look at this, I see that we're starting to get kind of an ugly file here. So it may be time to start thinking about cleanup. There's sort of this natural ebb and flow that happens in software development where you spend some time adding features and making things messier and then sometimes cleaning it up. And this should be happening at the very small scale and at the large scale. So every couple of lines, you should be looking for an opportunity to clean up. And then every couple of functions, you should be looking for an opportunity to clean up. Every couple of files, looking for an opportunity to clean up. And you'll find those opportunities as you go. So we've slowly been adding on to our build script here, and it's starting to get a little bit messy. So we might want to come back to that. But before that, let's just see if this worked. Now that we've added describe and it as globals, I'm thinking that our lint will work. And it does. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and check that in. So we've prevented our Mocha globals from triggering lint errors. Now let's look at cleaning this up. One thing I'm noticing is that we've got this task to lint things, which is actually fairly straightforward. We call jshint.checkFiles, and this is the simple build jshint runner. It takes the file, some options, and globals. The main reason this is so ugly is because the options are so long. What we can do is factor this out. When you change a program without without changing its behavior. That's called refactoring. Just like you can change an algebraic expression without changing its behavior by factoring parts of it out, we can factor out parts of our code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it in a new function called lint options. I'm going to have that new function just return this value. Let's fix the formatting there. And now that I have that function, I can delete this bit here and call lint options instead. This is exactly the same as what we had before. It's just factored differently. This is a refactoring that we've done here. Specifically, it's the extract function or extract method refactoring. And if I've done that right, the behavior is unchanged, which means this should still work. And it does. Now we can do the same thing for our globals. So let's make a lint globals function. And here's a little challenge for you. If you're following along, go ahead and stop the video here and figure out how to refactor this yourself. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. What we're going to do here is we're going to take the parameter, the variable that we provide to globals, we're going to cut that out here, paste it in here, and call it like this. Okay, now if I've done that right, this should still work exactly the same. And actually I didn't do it right, not entirely. It looks like I've got an unnecessary semicolon on line 79 of our Jake file, which is right here. So let's try that now. And there we go. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and check that in. So we've cleaned up our lint task in the Jake file. And that's all looking good. Okay, now that we've done that refactoring, you'll notice that I did the refactoring before we started a new idea, when we knew everything was working properly. You can refactor before or after you make a change, but always do your refactorings when your code is working. If you try to refactor when things are broken, then it'll be harder to fix whatever's broken because you won't know whether to blame your mistake in adding the new feature or your mistake in refactoring. So we finished this refactoring. Now we can add the new feature of having karma be automated in our Jake file. So what we want to do is, rather than saying node modules bin karma start, what I'd like to be able to do is say something like Jake start. Or rather, let's have it say Jake karma to start the karma server. So right now that's not supported. I'm going to add a new task right up here with our general purpose tasks. And I'll say start the karma server. Now, in order for our test to run, the karma server has to be running. So I'm going to say run this first. And that's also why I've put it first, even before the default. And now we need some way of running karma. So we'll say starting karma server, just like I like in all my tasks, have them say something interesting. And now if we say Jake karma, it will say, oh, you know what? I made a mistake. The description goes before the task, which should have the name karma. There we go. Let's try that again. There we go. Now it says starting karma server. Now what we need to do is have some way of running karma. Now we could use jake.exec and we could say node modules, karma, bin, et cetera, et cetera. But I actually have another simple build module that will run karma for us. So I'm going to go ahead and install that now. Let's go ahead and check in this little change. And now I'm going to install simple build karma. And as always, we'll ignore scripts and save dev. Oops, that should have been install simple build karma. Let's try that again. And then we will check this in. Do an npm rebuild. Do a git status, and as usual for just about everything except for karma, no binaries. Now that we have Simple Build JS Hint installed, we can use it very similar to the way lint works. That all of these Simple Build modules have the same basic signature. It starts out by calling, well, first we'll need to require it. Then we'll run the functions, which if you look at the Karma documentation, it's at Simple Build Karma. Find that here. You can see that there's two functions for us to call, start and run. So we'll call karma.start. It'll take an options object, followed by success and failure. And as usual, we'll need to pass in the async option. Now for the options, what we pass in is the location of the config file, which is simply karma.conf.js. Now if I've done that right, we should be able to type Jake Karma and see that start. And there it goes. Fantastic. So we should be able to go back here to our Karma tab, reload it, and see it connect. That's great. That's half the battle. But now we need to actually get this to run our tests when we run Jake. We're checking our node versions, we're linting, but we're not running our Karma test. So that's what's next. So down here in our default build, we check the version, we run lint, and now we want this to also run our tests. So here we have supporting tasks, check node version, lint our JavaScript. Let's now have run tests. Make a task called test function. We'll write out console.log testing JavaScript. And that should work. We should be able to say Jake and see that come out. There it is right there. And now running this should be a matter of just running our Simple Build Karma run option, which takes the config file and a bunch of other stuff we don't need to worry about right now. So that's going to be very similar. I'm going to say karma.run config file karma.conf.js complete fail async true, just like any other Jake task. And now that should actually run our tests. Oops, I've left out a semicolon. Now it should run our tests. Hey, and look at that. There it goes. It is running our tests. And if we break them, we should see our build fail. If we say 3 plus 4 is equal to 0, we should see our build fail. Look at that. Addition adds positive numbers, expected 0 but was 7. Jake aborted, Karma test failed. Perfect. That is just what we want. We now have a nice automated build with our linting and our testing and our node version check all in place. And that is fantastic. Let's go back to our Jake file. Did you notice something when we were doing this? Did you notice how we typed in karma.conf.js twice? That's duplication. And that is the kind of thing that leads to bugs down the road. And if we change where karma.conf.js is, which is actually not as far-fetched as it might sound, it's easy for us to change one of these, but not the other, and have things not work. So to fix that, what we need to do is factor this out. We need to refactor our code so that there is no more duplication. And one way to do that is to put that value in a variable. In fact, a constant-like variable. I'll call that the karma config. And I put it in all uppercase to say that this is like a constant. It's technically not a constant, but we'll treat it that way. It's going to have karma.conf.js in it, and we will replace every usage of karma.conf.js with that new variable. This is called the extract variable refactoring. We'll do the same thing down here. Now, when we change our value of the location of our Karma config file, everybody who's using it will automatically get that change. Let's make sure that worked. Should still be able to run our tests. Good. And we should also still be able to start our server. Takes a little while to shut down. There we go. Jake Karma, recapture, rerun, Everything's still working. Excellent. You can see how when you do these refactorings, how you want to recheck things right away. That's why having automated tests is valuable. So let's go ahead and check this in. What we have done here is we've added testing to our Jake file. There's one more thing I want to do before we finish off. Do you remember how way back in chapter 1 we talked about reproducible builds and we talked about kinds of dependencies, and particularly we said that anything that we depend on needs to be either checked into the repository or checked that we are actually using the right version. If it's an external dependency, we can't check in. Well, here's a question for you. Do you see the external dependency that we're depending on here? It's a very important one, and if it changes, our test could stop working without us realizing it. Or if we are using an updated version of this dependency and other people are using an older version, our test could work on our machine, but not on theirs. Which dependency is it? Here's a hint. It's so ubiquitous you probably consider it a piece of the background, something that's just always available. What is it? It's our web browser. We are assuming that we're using Firefox version 40, but we're not checking that value. So let's go ahead and check that. One of the things I like about the Simple Build Karma, if I do say so myself, is that it will have the ability to check that you're running the right version of the browser. So we can take this version string here and we can add it to our run tests in a new parameter called expected browsers. That takes an array of, well, browser strings. So let's put that in a string. And now it will check that we are running that when we run our tests. So if we run it, everything works okay. But let's say we don't use Firefox this time. Let's say we use Chrome instead. So we'll go ahead and bring up Chrome. Here it is. And we'll look at localhost 9876. And we'll run our tests. And they'll pass. But then we'll get a warning that Firefox 40 wasn't tested, and that Jake will fail saying it didn't test all the browsers. Now we've taken care of our external dependencies. And actually, while we're at it, we want this to be cross-browser testing, right? So let's go ahead and put Chrome in there as one of the tests, one of the browsers that we're testing. We want to test Firefox 40 and Chrome 44. And if we don't have them both running, then our tests will fail. You can see now that we're running Chrome here, but we expected Firefox. So now what I'll do is I'll get Firefox into the mix. There we go. And one of the neat things about Karma is it will run tests on both browsers simultaneously. So watch this go. When we run our tests, they both fire off. You can see that both browsers have run both tests and both succeeded. And that is just fantastic. Now, when the browser upgrades, which they do frequently, this test will fail, and we'll need to come back in here and tell it which the new version is. And that way, everybody on our team will have to upgrade at the same time, and that's good because we want everybody on the team using the same versions of our dependencies. Let's go ahead and check that in. Now our Jake file will fail if the wrong browsers are tested. However, there are some situations where you don't want to test all the browsers all the time. And in this case, there's another option provided to you in the Simple Build Karma called strict. We can turn that to false. And what that will do is say, hey, if we don't have everything, it will still give us a warning. You can see I've taken off Chrome. Chrome was not tested, but our build did not fail. What we want to do is have this configurable from the command line. We want the ability to say, by default, strict is true. But on occasion, we want to be able to say, let's loosen things up for just this run one test. Let's say that we've got a problem that only affects Firefox, and for speed or something like that, we want to disable all the other browsers and just test Firefox. That will happen occasionally. Typically, we want to test on all browsers, but sometimes not. So we want to be able to turn this behavior on and off. We want it to default to on, but have the ability to turn it off. And that's where one of the important features of your build tool comes in. It needs to have command line processing. For Jake, you can add command line options like loose equals true that will be passed through to your build file. The details are in the Jake documentation, but I'll just tell you that anything you pass in on the command line like this, something equals something else, that turns into a variable in the process.env variable that's built into Node. So here we can say process.env.loose, and that will get assigned to the value of strict. Of course, we want it to be the opposite of that. We want strict to be exactly the opposite of whatever process.environment.loose is. If it's not defined, then the opposite of it will be true. So now what we have is when we say loose equals true, Chrome is not tested, but the build still passes. But if we leave it out, if we just say Jake, then loose is not defined, the opposite of that is true, and we should see a failure. Yeah, Chrome is not tested. So that is our automation. That little bit of extra stuff here at the end about command line processing and Jake, if you didn't quite get that, don't worry about it. You can just go ahead and leave this parameter out or set it to true, and you'll be just fine. This is a little bit of a wrinkle for those of you who are interested in the more advanced stuff. Your exercise for this time, go ahead and get Karma working inside your build file. If you're feeling like doing something a little more advanced, take a look at the refactorings. Is it possible to refactor this list of expected browsers? It is. Would that be a good idea? Well, I'll let you decide on that, but if you think it is, go ahead and factor it out. Play around with the Jake command line options as well. Anything that you type in on the command line with this equal command, Jake loose equals whatever, or anything equals anything else, will get put onto process.env. Write some tasks and play with that and see what kind of things you can come up with. And with that, we've got our automated build very, very nicely working. There's one more thing I want to do before we wrap up this chapter, and that is get our tests truly running across browsers. We've seen our build working on Firefox and Chrome, but I also want to see it working on mobile browsers and on Internet Explorer. And getting that to work on the Mac is a bit of a trick. We'll look at that next time. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.